Wave at me if you can hear me. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I hope more of you than San Mateo can see the slides that Carol's going to use in just a few minutes. You'll have to let us know when we get there. I'd like to ask everyone to please keep your audio muted. When we have interactive parts of the presentation, we'll call on you to unmute one at a time so we can try and avoid the echo effect. To start out, I'd like to introduce two colleagues over here to my left. The camera will shift to them when I stop talking. Wendo and Wendy Ropes from California
Kelly Faustino.
Kelly Faustino, sorry, from California After School Network, who are one of the sponsors of the Power of Discovery program. And they're going to introduce the program.
Good morning, everyone. Can you see me? Put a thumbs up if you can see me. No. Oh, there we go. Okay, good morning. My name is Wendo. I'm the lead coordinator with the California After School Network, working on the STEM and Out of School Time Initiative. And what the goal of the STEM and Out of School Time Initiative really is to bring quality STEM programming and STEM learning opportunities to out of school time programs throughout California.
Excuse me. Can San Mateo mute their microphone?
I think we're muted all over the room.
No, San Mateo in particular. It's the one that we're getting double feedback of.
Sorry, Kelly.
That's okay.
Yeah, everything's turned off.
Okay, now I don't. Now it's normal. Okay. Sorry for the interruption.
Great. So I'll just go ahead and continue with that. So the way that we are bringing quality STEM programming throughout California is really a two-pronged approach. The first prong being the regional innovation support providers that have been established throughout California. There have been 5 regional innovation support providers established, 4 of which being partnerships, and the current partnerships that we're working with today encompasses the Greater Bay Area. This partnership is with Alameda County Office of Education, working with the Gateways East Bay STEM Learning Network and the Tech Museum in San Jose. And the way that this partnership is going to be helping you bring quality STEM programming to the out-of-school time is really working with you through a readiness and needs assessment to identify the needs and the capacities that your current program has in order to implement STEM programming to your students. And through that needs and readiness assessment, what the RISP are going to do is to help you create a program plan, really an individualized program plan, capitalizing on the capacities that you currently have, as well as building targeted technical assistance around the needs of your current program. Not only that, a part of this initiative also is going to be an evaluation process. And through this, what we're really looking for is 3 different outcomes, program outcomes, student outcomes, and staff outcomes. As far as program outcomes, what we're looking for is, is the program doing more STEM? Is it more high quality STEM happening within your program? Staff outcomes are staff feeling more confident, competent, and motivated to implement STEM programming with their students. And as far as student outcomes, are the students more interested, more motivated, and learning STEM curriculum within their programs? So, that's the first prong. The first approach is through these regional innovation support providers established throughout California. The second approach is really through the Virtual Innovation Support Center, and my colleague here, Kelly Faustino, is going to talk to you about a little bit about that.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you, Wynn, for that. I'm also a coordinator with the California After School Network, and I'm just going to talk briefly about the Virtual Innovation Support Center. So the Virtual Innovation Support Center is located at www.powerofdiscovery.org. And I see people writing, so I'll repeat that. It's www.powerofdiscovery.org. And we're looking to launch our second beta version on February 1st, so make sure and check that out once it's launched. So the Virtual Innovation Support Center is really to help support out-of-school time programs throughout California implement high-quality STEM learning opportunities. It offers a variety of resources and tools, including professional development, research, curriculum that's both vetted and online, STEM activities, assessment tools, and much more. So make sure and check that out. It's really a place for users to come to gain access to quality tools and resources to implement learning opportunities within their programs. So the California After School Network has 7 working committees, one in which is the STEM committee that meets virtually once a month to advance STEM and out of school time. And from that STEM committee, a work group has been formed specifically around the Virtual Innovation Support Center. And what they're doing is that they're looking at the resources, the content that is currently on the website to ensure that it's meeting the needs of the practitioners throughout California, as well as looking at the format. So is it user friendly? Is it meeting is it easy to access the materials that are on the website? So once again, I urge you to please go log on to the website, www.powerofdiscovery.org, and check it out.
Thank you both, and thanks for coming. They came all the way down here to Emeryville from Davis this morning, so they had a long drive. So the next thing we want to do on the agenda is I want to take a few minutes and introduce you, if you haven't seen it already, or if you have, to review a little bit the readiness and needs assessment. The one that I'm holding in my hands might look slightly different than the one that you have received or you've seen, because we just got a new version. I'm going to ask one more time if folks can mute themselves. I hear another voice in the background. Okay, I'll carry on. As Wen said, the Readiness and Needs Assessment is a tool for your programs to start to look at what you're already doing so that we can set kind of a baseline. It's for you to look at yourself, and it's also for the central organization to gather some baseline information. And the Readiness and Needs Assessment, it covers 3 main areas. I'm going to ask if hosts haven't already handed them out, make sure folks have them in front of them so they can go over it with me. So if you just flip to the table of contents, you can see that the 3 main areas that we're asking you to assess are your current programming, the core instructional day, and that means 2 things. The core instructional day is both what's already happening within your school at which your after-school program is located, and it also means the relationship that currently exists between the after-school program and the school day program. And then the 3rd area is the partnership assessment. So we're going to take a look first at the program assessment area. Before I get into the details a little bit, I do want to say that this tool is designed to be completed for multiple sites at one time, so it's designed to be completed by a group of people working together, district representatives, CBO representatives, representatives from individual school sites, and any partners who are involved, all working together to complete this plan. So it's not meant to be completed individually at each individual site. We're looking more for an overview of what's going on across your organizations. So if you take a look at the program assessment section, which starts on page 5, it's just asking for some basic overview information, the name of your organizations, the ages you serve, and then who's actually represented, whose information is represented in this document, so who contributed to this document. And then on the next page, there's some grids which give you an opportunity to talk about how frequently you're doing STEM activities during the after-school program, and so how many minutes and what types of materials and resources you're using. We're also interested in professional development, whether you've had, as after-school providers or program supervisors, whether you and your staff have had opportunities to do any professional development. I do want to pause at this moment to just tell you, We really do want you to be completely open, honest, and frank in completing this document. As I said earlier, this is setting a baseline. If you haven't had any opportunities to do professional development around STEM, that's great. That lets us know. It also lets you know and the folks you're working with know that this is an excellent opportunity to start doing that work. So after the professional development section, there's a section to talk about what kinds of STEM opportunities you're currently implementing in your after-school program. And then the final page in this section is a page that you'll see repeated twice more. It's at the end of each one of the sections of the readiness and needs assessment. And it's an opportunity for you to just jot down some ideas about things that you'd like to see in the future, so some goals. You'll get an opportunity after you complete this document to do to complete a program planning tool where you'll get an opportunity to go much more into depth. But this is a page really for you after you've answered all of these questions. If you have some ideas about things that you'd like to try and start implementing immediately or in the future, this is a place to jot them down. The next section, as I mentioned, is about the core instructional day, support and collaboration. And so the first section is about how your after-school programs are currently working together or not with what's going on during the core instructional day. And then there's a bunch of opportunity for you to talk with your principal or instructional leaders at the individual schools and find out what it is that they're actually doing around STEM. Because, as Wen mentioned, this project is really about leveraging partnerships. And so if your core instructional day program is already doing a lot of work around STEM, this is a great opportunity to try and talk to those folks about participating in it yourself. And then this section ends as the last section with the page where you can jot down some goals. And then the final section is a partnership assessment. A big part of this project is to try to leverage resources that you have in your community. And so we're curious and we're interested in you trying to find out whether there are people in your community, higher education, science institutions, other K-12 schools, other after-school programs that you are already working with or that you can work with in the future to leverage those resources and work together on developing STEM opportunities for kids. And then the final page is the third repetition of the opportunity for you to write down some goals. I do want to also draw your attention, the very last page, or the second to last page in this document, third to last page in this document is a glossary with some terms that defines what we mean by STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and a few other terms that are there for you. So at this time, because I'm not sure whether folks have had an opportunity to do this, I'd like to just give you about 10 minutes within your own small groups to take a look through this, to share ideas, feedback, questions that you might have, and then you can share those with us. So about 10 minutes, and I'll call everybody back together to look over the readiness and needs assessment. We're still muted. You have about, I think we're just about done, so if I can get everybody back now. So I just wanted to give folks an opportunity to give us any kind of feedback or give us a gist of your conversation. And the way we'll do that is I'm going to call on one site at a time so that we can unmute one at a time. And maybe if you can think about designating one spokesperson. So I think we'll try San Mateo County Office of Ed first. So someone from San Mateo County Office of Ed want to share something about? San Mateo? Can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Now we can hear you.
Okay, you can hear us? Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'll start over then.
They can hear us now.
My name is Reba Rose. I'm with the Boys and Girls Club of the Peninsula. We appreciate the tool and are very excited about it. What we're less clear on is the entire project, if there's anything you can say about the resources. So we'll fill out the needs assessment, but can you tell us about the regional innovation support provider or what assistance there might be to help us to make recommendations and help us with next steps forward?
Sure. So if you guys want to mute again. So each regional innovation support provider is working slightly differently. And our plans are, this is the first of a series of 6 workshops that we're offering. So our hope is that we can help you with the partnership opportunities and with understanding the resources that are available around the Bay Area, and particularly in each of your individual regions, through our workshop series, and then through the development of a community of practice where you can work with some of the other folks who are participating in the partnership project. So our next workshop, unfortunately, these are all on the bottom of your agenda today. You'll notice in the far right-hand column that we have just general dates, but we don't have specific dates yet. You can imagine that trying to coordinate this project is a little complicated because we're working with a lot of partners who are presenting the workshops and then trying to secure the sites so we can present them like this. So the next workshop scheduled for sometime in February is going to be about inquiry-based teaching strategies. The following workshop is models for alignment with school day Common Core state standards. Then we're going to do a workshop on free and low-cost resources. The next workshop is on professional development strategies, models, and options. And then the final workshop is on design challenge learning. So one of the interesting parts about this project is that there isn't a whole lot of funding that came with it. And we're trying to make that funding work as hard as it can. So we're trying to take advantage of the resources that are already available and help connect you with them as a first step. I can speak for my organization, Gateways East Bay STEM Network, also to say that one of the roles that we've taken for ourselves in this project is to look for other sources of funding that can help support you in doing this work. We know things like professional development are often very costly. I hope that answers your question. So we'll go next to Alameda County Office of Ed.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you, Jackie.
Hi. So I guess I misunderstood. Everybody didn't have a copy of the needs and readiness assessment. We had people were sharing copies. So some people got a chance to look at them. And I'm going to ask if anybody in the room has a comment or a question about it. We don't. So then I'm going to add something, Bruce, to your comments that you, when you described the whole project. I want to give a shout out to Gateways, who is our partner. Alameda County Office of Ed, Gateways, and the Tech Museum were awarded this regional grant. And Gateways has managed to get 100 partners, over 100 partners around the table to over the past 3 years. And I'm part of their after school efforts, but they've got all of the big museums and science centers, Chabot Space and Science Center, all these organizations are giving their time and resources, or for very little. They're getting very little from this grant, I can tell you. So Exploratorium, Chabot Space and Science Center, I mentioned the Tech Museum, California Academy of Sciences, any of the big organizations are part of this. Employers, the technology world all over the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, they're involved. Higher education is involved. Cal State East Bay, where Gateways is housed, so they have 3 initiatives going. They have a teacher track to try to move people from into STEM teaching, including from after school. So that's something to think about. There's an early learning and there's an after school effort. So I won't say any more, but thanks again to Gateways.
Thank you, Jackie. Next, let's go to Solano County Office of Ed.
It's on, yes, you're ready. So my name's Carol Lewis, and I'm with Vallejo City Unified, so I'm not speaking for everyone in the room today, but when we sat with this needs assessment with my 3 coordinators from our middle schools, all of those schools have daytime STEAM. We added an A for arts focus, and we're really trying to, from the ground up, build programming in after school to complement that work during the day. So we're really at the ground. So I know a lot of the answers to these questions will be nothing at this time, but looking over the document, it looks like it will be really some great questions to help us think about what we do want to create. So I really appreciate this document.
Thank you,
And
Carol.
then I also wanted to add that we do have a guest with us today from Lawrence Hall of Science, and she did come with to our meeting, our last network meeting. So many of the sites are working with her to try and incorporate STEM activities for students. So we're happy about that.
That is fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Next on our list is Santa Clara.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Hi, Julie.
Hi. We're doing great over here. I have supplied them with the now outdated needs and readiness assessment, and we quickly printed out some agendas, so we're right here with you all.
Wonderful. Okay. So I think I got everybody who's on video conference. So our next step is I would like to introduce our feature presenter for the day. Her name is Carol Tang. Carol is the director of the Coalition for Science After School, one of those great organizations that's housed here in the Bay Area at Lawrence Hall of Science, which welcomes any and all of you to participate. A lot of what they offer is just resources that are free and easy to access. So I'll turn it over to Carol. I'm hopeful that, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see Carol's slides? They should be up on your screen right now. San Mateo says yes.
Yay.
Alameda says yes.
No one
Santa Clara says no. How about Solano? No. I'll let Carol start talking and I'll see if I can fiddle around and get her slides up on all of your screens.
Okay.
Go ahead, Carol.
Hi, thank you. Another sort of quick introduction. I'm also on the STEM Council for this initiative across the state. I'm just really excited to be part of this. I've been teaching for a long time. I was a geology professor and so on. I've never done a webinar before, so I'm pretty nervous. I didn't sleep last night. I'm so nervous. And so what I thought we would do is to kind of kick it off is to start off with a magic trick. I don't have very good jokes, so we're going to start off with a magic trick. So, if I have a loop, and, it's great using these raffle tickets because you can see the coloring on them if you can afford to buy a set here. But, if I take a loop and I cut it in half, the other great things about these raffle tickets is you don't have to have scissors. And so since I'm doing this at conferences, I have to fly places. This is a good way to do it. So if I have a loop and I tear it apart, it comes into two, right? Well, if I take this, and this is, as you can see, because of the coloring, I've made one twist to it. Now, if I cut this in half, what are we going to get? Well, if I keep going, and while I do this magic trick, Bruce is going to do a magic trick with a PowerPoint as well. So if I keep going, what am I going to get? I get one long loop instead of two loops, right? Well, here's my other part of this magic trick. Aren't you guys oohing and awing already? So if I have another one, again, if you look at the color, it has a twist in it. But this time, instead of cutting it straight down the center, I'm actually going to use my scissors, and I'm going to cut from one side instead. So this is the real good part of my magic trick here, because I'm not getting you guys to ooh so far. But if I keep cutting, first I realize, oh, Bruce said you're all muted and you're really oohing on your side. Whoa, I'm still cutting. How is this going to work? Well, I'm going to keep cutting. Wow, I'm still cutting. Okay, this is a really good magic trick. I'm still cutting. I should have made a shorter loop. And I'm still cutting. And, okay, what am I going to get? I've now got two loops that are interconnected. So I went from having two loops separate to one large loop. And now I've got two loops that are connected. Ta-da! Okay, so this is the question then. Is this STEM? Was this a STEM activity? Well, it's automatically a STEM activity because it's on a PowerPoint, right? That's technology, so that's STEM, right? Well, it's also STEM because it's actually a math formula. This is Mobius, and Mobius wrote a mathematical formula that describes this. But you know what? Every shape has a mathematical formula, right? So does that mean everything we do is STEM? Well, is this STEAM because we use a piece of paper and you can make a color and you can make patterns? Is that art? Is that STEAM now? And now people have asked me if I believe in STEAM. So STEAM is putting history into STEM and into art. So what's my answer to that? Well, my answer to that is let's not have an argument over what STEM is. Let's not have an argument over whether art should be part of STEM or not. Of course it should be part of STEM. Should history be part of STEM? Sure. Should literacy? Of course. Should handwriting? Sure. Should fitness? Should nutrition? I mean, anything could be STEM, but that's not the question. Because if we get bogged down on that, we could spend days and days doing that definition and arguing about it versus focusing on what we think is actually important about STEM, science learning, and about kids. And so my take on it is really we should focus on quality, right? What we should really talk about is what was great about this activity, or what was maybe good about the activity, or maybe Not good. Maybe what was somewhat okay about this activity as a STEM activity? So if you think about that, well, was there anything okay about it? Well, I guess it was good because it was somewhat engaging. Maybe it was a little bit surprising. Maybe it was a little bit fun. So maybe there's some good things about this activity, but there's also a lot of really bad things about it, right? And so the bad things about it could be that I never said it was actually math until after the activity was over. You guys just sat there and I did everything. I talked and talked and talked, and you guys didn't talk at all. So there's a lot of bad things about this activity. And so one of the things that I wanted to make sure is one of the goals for today is I have a few goals for this presentation. And the first goal is that you all know what quality after school already is. What we're giving you in the Power of Discovery is some tools to think systematically, to figure out what you could improve, and how STEM sort of is integrated in that. But you know pretty much what's a bad activity. I mean, I can go into an after-school program or a classroom program and probably within 10 minutes get a feel by looking at the students, by looking at the instructor. You all know this as well. If you were going to pick an after-school program for your kid or your niece, you would know what to do. And so again, I'm not saying that we can just do this all by intuition, all by gut feeling, but what I hear a lot is that people feel that they can't do STEM, although they've run great programs, they've taught great programs, they've written great programs for after school, but when it comes to STEM, they feel that it's got to be a checklist of, did I use this tool? Did I use this term? Did the kids get to do this? And it becomes so prescribed that people lose sight of the forest by focusing on not just a tree, but on one little leaf on a tree. And so what I'd like to do is stop arguing about STEM. Let's talk about what's high quality and use the tools and skills that you already have and refine them for looking at STEM. So that's the first goal, is to think about what you already have. It's like a needs assessment for your own intuition, your own skills, your own quality. You're all high quality purchasers of after school programming for you, your family, as well as for your programs. And so you utilize the skills you already have in STEM. Another goal is to introduce you to the terminology, the tools, the structures, the buzzwords that people are using. And you know what? I'll admit, it is going to be mind-numbing. Okay, I did this PowerPoint. I was making it yesterday at 2 a.m. And, you know, my eyes began to blur. So what I'm trying to tell you is it's not that I'm telling you things that are unimportant. But it's okay if you're going to tune out a little bit. What I'm trying to do is to give you that self-confidence about these terms, understand the context of it. You can always go back to the terms. I'll load up the PowerPoint slide. It'll either be on that website, on SlideShare. We'll send you out the link. So don't worry about the terms. Don't worry about the slide taking specific notes. What I want to do today is give you that context for the structure, the goals, and the terminology. And by the end of this series of workshops, you're going to know it all really well. My last goal then is to really think about what are the important reasons why you're doing STEM, STEAM, STEAM, whatever you're doing it high quality. You know, what is it at the end of the day you want the children to have received, and what do you personally want to receive in terms of your staff satisfaction, the reputation for your program? It's all those other things that are involved in the STEM work. Personally, I'm a paleontologist by training, so I love science. I'm a nerd, I will admit it. But at the same time, I understand that not everyone's going to have that same passion about a piece of rock that I do. But we want people to have is a passion about something about the natural world, something they want to know more about. If we can instill that and use science as a way to explore the natural world, that's the ultimate goal. And so for you all, through this, again, you're going to tune out for parts of it. It's going to be a lot of terminology. The idea is to let you get a context and to sort of get an idea of what you think is going to be most important to you and your program so that we can move ahead in this entire process of Power of Discovery. So those are my goals. So let me try again, okay? I had the magic trick, and maybe it was a little bit of fun, but it wasn't really high quality STEM. So what could I do? Well, here's another version of this. So I could say, this is a Mobius strip. Mobius, this gentleman that you see here, wrote a mathematical formula that described that shape. And why is that shape important? Well, the shape is interesting because it's the only one-sided object that we know of. Isn't that cool? Well, it's a one-sided object that might actually have some relevance in the world. Because if you think about a conveyor belt wears down on one side versus the other side. Well, if you have a Mobius strip that continuously loops through because it only has sort of one side, then both sides wear equally. And so instead of you having to replace the conveyor belt so quickly, you can actually use the conveyor belt for twice as long as you would normally. So a Mobius strip is math. It describes a very interesting object, a one-sided object, and it has relevance in today's world. So you know what? If you cut one of these Mobius strips, you end up, instead of getting 2 loops, you get 1 long loop. And guess what? If you take one of these Mobius strips and you cut it from the side, you actually end up with 2 big loops that are intertwined. Okay, so if that was the activity, that's very STEMmy, right? It has the math. I told you it was math. I showed you the formula. I told you it's relevant in today's world. I told that to you. I told you why it was important. I told you some of the important, interesting quirks about that shape. So isn't that a great STEM activity? Didn't I do everything a good STEM activity should do? Well, I would think that most of you would say it is not a great STEM activity. Maybe some of you would say, okay, it was a good STEM activity. Carol really tried, and she didn't go to sleep till 2 o'clock in the morning, so it's okay. And some of you would say, you know what, it's actually only somewhat okay. And oh shoot, uh-oh. Sorry, I was trying to move it closer. Sorry. And some of you would actually say it's only somewhat okay. That's okay. We're about to go into group. Okay. So that was not a great STEM activity either. And it's hard to talk to all of you, but I can already see by your faces that was boring, right? Okay. So maybe it had everything that was supposed to be in there. I told you it was relevant, for goodness sakes. I told you what it was. I told you that it was interesting. Didn't you find it interesting? Why are you sitting there with your arms crossed? You look really bored. So the other problem with this is that it was not a good STEM activity. And the lesson for this is, yeah, you could go through a darn checklist for science learning. You could say, I did this. It was intentional, for goodness sake, right? I mean, I intended to do it that way. I intended to do it poorly, right? So really, don't look at the checklist. You've got to look at the whole package. And that package was just as bad as the first one. The first one, I might have gone overboard on, woo, it's so cool. And I didn't have any content. The second one, I did all the things I was supposed to, but not in a way that tried to be engaging. I didn't try to give you anything to think about. I spoon-fed you one piece of fact versus another. So the reality is that that was not a really good STEM activity either. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to let all of you design one. Okay? So how would you design a better STEM after-school activity with the Mobius strip? Okay? And I chose Mobius strip myself because if I did one with dinosaurs, I know it really, really well. And who can make dinosaurs boring? I mean, we probably could do it intentionally. But, that's going to be... So I chose something that I'm really bad at, math, and forced myself to think about how would we actually make this into a pretty good after-school activity. So I'm going to give all of you, hopefully working in small groups, and I think I see scissors at some places, so don't run with them, of course, but there's strips of paper and some tape, or you could do it as a thought exercise. But the idea is, how would you design a better STEM after-school activity? And I'm not going to give you any rules, no checklists. All you have is my bad examples and your own gut feeling, your own experience, your own skills of after-school programming to design this. Okay? So we'll give you all about 10 minutes, and maybe each site can do a little bit of share out as well, and then we'll share it out as a larger group. Okay? Okay, go at it. Here we go.
On the remote.
Okay, got it. Oh, on the remote. Hello? Oh, I ended.
Jackie, can you hear us?
Yeah, we have a question.
Go ahead.
Could I ask our group to hold up for a second? Could Carol demonstrate what to do with the second strip?
Oh, yes. Although, oh, there it is. Oh, there. So the idea is that instead of cutting it straight down the middle, you cut it maybe 1/3 of the way to the side, and it should connect up the second time you go around. But you know, it's supposed to be, you're supposed to figure it out yourself, right? So yeah, the idea is you cut it down maybe 1/3 of the way, and it's supposed to actually, it will kind of meet up. I had to cheat a little bit. Should we go ahead and? Oh, okay, we have a question over there.
Where? Where's that?
What's the right hand, upper right hand? Is that
Santa
So you could also ask,
Clara?
like, what happens
No,
to
that's
Solano?
Solano.
Solano has a question.
Can't see the PowerPoint at all.
Oh, sorry. Right. So the idea was that you can't see the PowerPoint. So instead of cutting it straight down the middle, you offset it so you're only cutting like 1/3 of the way from the right-hand edge. And then when you cut it all the way through, you'll see it crosses the middle again, and then you'll do another loop, and it will kind of meet up.
Okay. So just throughout your presentation, as you refer to the PowerPoint, just know that we can't see it.
So, thank you. And I'll read off the other ones, because the other ones have more text. You're right.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
okay. You guys have an advantage, because then you really get STEM the way it should be, right? No PowerPoint.
Exactly.
Yeah, that'll be a little tough.
We have all teachers.
Yeah.
Cut in.
Okay. So some people are still playing, and the people here in Emeryville have to, because I'm watching them, so they're really still playing. But you guys can play all day if you want. So the idea then is that we would share out what are some of the things that you think would make this an actually a high quality or higher quality STEM after school activity. So maybe I'll have Bruce call on people. Is anybody ready to report out a couple things they did? You want to call on people? It's easier if you call on.
Sure. Let's start with Santa Clara.
Santa Clara?
We'll go in opposite direction this time.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
So we talked about what could make it a little bit more high quality STEM for our kids, and number one would be just letting them start exploring very open-ended exploration with what do they think is going to happen. Also, we wanted to take more time and pause before we did an action and get them to start thinking of some hypotheses and verbalizing their thoughts that way.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I'm going to write these down, and I'm going to type these up so that when you get the notes, you'll see them. And I guess I'm getting... So I have open-ended, and then pause for sharing and articulating hypotheses, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's go to Solano County next.
Solano County?
Okay, yeah. We talked about having all the students, make sure that all the students have the materials, so that they're all having a hands-on experience. We also talked about maybe having the students have the different, maybe working in partners and having the different shapes where one person has the the twisted circle. One person has, just the regular circle. And for the older students, maybe having a compare and contrast paperwork where they can say, well, I started off with this one, and this is what I did, and this is what happened, and, my partner started off with this is what I did, and why did this happen, and come up with some ways where they can brainstorm and figure out why they got the outcome that they got.
Uh-huh. So I have on there, just to share it with everybody, providing hands-on experience, making sure all students have materials, working with partners, giving them different shapes so they can compare and contrast, and then really encouraging them to ask why they got the outcomes that they got. Good.
Okay, let's go to Alameda County next.
Alameda County?
We're here.
Yes, I just had an idea that maybe for the material, instead of the strips of paper, students could use fruit roll-ups, and that
yes.
I think they would all want to participate and work with us.
Yes. Use fruit roll-ups.
And it would be the snack component also.
And healthy eating, kind of. Anything else from Alameda County?
Yeah, one more.
Came up with an idea of jokes. So on one side, write the joke, the other side, the punchline.
Ah.
Nice.
Yeah. So taking advantage of the sort of one-sided, two-sided nature, writing a joke on one side and punchline on the other. And when they can't do it, that could be interesting too, right? I like that one. That's really creative.
And let's go to San Mateo.
So we have two different groups. The first group, can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
Okay. The first group we talked about starting, all students having materials in their hands and starting by asking them to create the first loop, and then asking them to find a way, challenging them to find a way to turn that loop into two loops with the same circumference. So we would get mathematical skills in there. Then we would show them how to create the Mobius strip and have them make an additional loop and ask them if they can use the same process that they used in the first challenge to predict. So predict, if you use the same process that you used, the same cutting process that you used in the first challenge, what will be the result with this different type of loop. So then building in prediction, observation of what occurs, and revision of the prediction if needed. And that we would, so building in sort of mathematical skills as well as scientific process. And then that we had different approaches in our group to how we would set the context. So one of us would do a historical look at Mobius and like why invention, why did he discover this? How did he discover this? So looking at the process of invention. We also talked about sort of like the conveyor belt. What are the technological uses of something like this? And why? Why is it a benefit to have a Mobius shape instead of a standard loop, for example? So we talked about the context setting as well as the challenges.
Good, good.
You guys want to describe yours?
We echo that. Good, good. Okay, okay. What about here? Anybody from Emeryville?
Well, I actually took mine a step further.
I guess you have to come back here.
If you keep talking, it should find you.
Oh.
But maybe not. Maybe you're too close.
We have these drone cameras who follow your voice. That's a little funny.
So I took the Mobius strip that we cut up so that we ended up with the two intertwining loops, and then just have the kids, you can ask them to see like what else they can do with it, so go beyond like just the regular activity. And then I actually cut mine up one more time and ended up with like a double twisted loop. So just have them experiment with what they actually have so they can just use it more, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. So sort of with an extension is having them cut more times and predicting what they think that they're going to see. Yeah. Another thing that one of the groups here at Emeryville talked about is, we just tell them it's a one-sided, but kind of like going with the writing the joke and the punchline, you could actually have them prove, how do we know it's one-sided? How would they, gather the evidence and convince someone that it's one-sided? So anything that somebody wants to share that we haven't talked about? Well, with that good report, we should just end right now, right? You all know quality. I mean, that was one of the goals that we talked about, is that, you all just with a few minutes and the most rudimentary materials, with not a setting that is even designed for promoting working together in STEM. This is the tool you had, right? And yet you all came up with different ways to look at skills, to think about open-ended, you thought about materials, you thought about collaboration. I mean, there's so many things that you've already put in there. So I know it's hard to share for the people who don't have the webinars, but hopefully you all have a chance to sort of talk about some of the things at your groups at DCYF and what's the other group?
They're just individuals out there.
Okay, and there's some individuals out there. So individuals out there, maybe your dog or cat can make sure you do a good Mobius strip. So really, when it comes down to it, there is a lot of things that we already are doing. And in fact, one of the things I'd like to just make sure we acknowledge today is the fact that on this very difficult situation with the webinar remotely, we're not even sitting in the same place, not all of you have PowerPoint, we already have embodied some of the things that we would like to do in after school STEM. So one of the things that we just joked about here is these webinars, it's kind of like STEM. It's open-ended, trial by error. We're trying to figure out what works. We're trying to figure out how to talk to you. And it's really kind of amazing that it's actually working. So if we just apply even our own lessons to what we're just doing, some of the things I tried to do here is that what I had all of you do was to answer a question, which is, how would you design a high-quality STEM activity? So you addressed a question, a design challenge, and you asked yourselves questions. What would a student do? What would really promote learning? So this whole idea of inquiry-based, which you're going to get in the second webinar, is really about questions, about setting it up to be a challenge, and then having you continuously ask questions and try to figure out how you would find out the answer. You all worked hands-on. And again, we had strips of paper. When I have some money from somebody, not this time, but from another project, I use receipt tape. So instead of having to cut all the strips of paper, you can buy receipt tape and it cuts down on some of the time. So I stocked up on it last time I was got some money to do some materials. You use tools. Again, in this case, we just use scissors, right? But the idea that we try to use authentic tools to look at science. If we needed a hand lens, if we need scissors, we need paper, whatever that is. But if we can try to incorporate that, that's a way to sort of expand people's ideas about STEM. You pursued your own ideas. So if you think about all the different groups and all the different locations, all of you had fairly different answers, even working on a very similar question, a very rudimentary question, and yet there's such a diversity of answers of what you could do. So you worked in groups, you communicated your ideas, you listened to others, you worked together, we shared, and there's a lot of other things I didn't put together. We used the language, right? We talked about application. There's so many different things that we did just in this short 10-minute activity that really tries to mirror what it is we can do. So again, we wanted to say, we all have those skills, and what we need to do for the rest of this webinar and for your readiness and continuous improvement in your path to STEM in your programs is really build on what you already know. Let's use the right language about what quality looks like. Let's use the research and the evidence that's out there about science and about how kids are engaged and how youth development really works. Let's capitalize on the science that's out there of that, and let's really hone what we can do. But the fundamental skills, the acknowledgement of what we want to accomplish in after-school science, you already have that. So don't let anybody talk you out of it. What you want to do now is find the skills, the outcomes, the methods that's going to work for you and your program. Okay? So with that, I'm going to sort of move on to a little bit more of the drier section. And like I said, I understand that it's a lot of terms, it's a lot of tables coming up. It's okay if it's a little mind-numbing. It's perfectly fine, especially for the first time. I'm not trying to do that. I'm not intentionally trying to bore you. But at the same time, it's just that I want you to get familiar with the terms. And in fact, the more boring it is, maybe the better, because it means that you're not getting something that you are scared of, because that will keep you awake. You're not seeing something that you've never heard of before. That's a good thing. So in fact, if some of this lulls you to sleep and you're like, I know that, that's actually a good thing. So if you start snoring, I'll think of it as a good thing, okay? So the first thing to think about then is, for those of you who can see the PowerPoint, but even those who aren't, close your eyes and imagine a place where there's lava lamps and foosball tables and beanbag chairs, and there's young people running around in tennis shoes and bicycling, and they're talking to each other excitedly. They're showing each other things on their iPads, on their computers, on their phones. And then there's a place that they can go and they can do climbing wall, and they can exercise. There's bicycles, there's workout rooms, there's even a snack room. That looks like after school to you, right? But what if I told you that place also has somebody to do your dry cleaning, and it has somebody to give you massages, and they also let you have your iPhone. They give you cell phones and smartphones to work on, and people work till 2 o'clock in the morning. Actually, what I described was not an after-school program with snacks and exercise and lava lamps. I'm describing Google headquarters. Google headquarters knows that you need the snacks to fuel you, you need those collaborative working spaces, you need physical activity to spur your brain, you need time to connect and to disconnect, you need those lava lamps, the whimsy, the fun, the colorful, creative sparks that are going to get you to get Google to take over the world. If Google knows that, and so many of our high-tech companies here in the Bay Area know that, why don't we do that when we talk about STEM? Why does STEM feel like it's got to be in a gray building with nothing going on, with really boring people in glasses, and it's silent? Except for the occasional time when they blow something up, right? So why is there such a fundamental difference between what we see in high-tech in Silicon Valley and the stereotypes that people have about science? And that's actually why I'm so excited about science after school, because here's a chance to get people to stop thinking about science the way it has not been working for people, that science is done by other people. Only really smart people who have no social lives, who have no friends, and who can't do anything else, they're the ones who are the scientists and engineers in our society. And so to me, science after school is a great way to break that stereotype and help young people who may not have thought that they could do science, help them feel like they're at home. So they could be at home at Google. In fact, if they crashed Google, they'd probably feel right at home. So to me, science, STEM, and after school have a lot in common. And so maybe at this point, let all of you do a little bit of just thinking of what are the characteristics of science and after school, besides snacks and climbing walls, that you think they have in common. So let me give you just 2 minutes. You can work to yourself or talk to a partner, but list some of the things that you think science, STEM, and after school have in common.
Do you want me to unmute them one at a time again so they have a chance to?
Yeah, why don't we do
feedback?
that? Yeah, why don't we do that? I think this is such an important step. But I have to, 11:15, right?
if you need more.
I'm just trying to make sure.
Yeah.
Good.
If you were good by 11:15, that's probably
No,
good.
that's good. Yeah, 'cause I don't think we do too much, but
Yeah.
in fact, I might skip some of the DOS things they have. They'll have them, and we don't need to, especially if they don't have the PowerPoint. Then I'm not going to focus on those. But we also want to take a break. So.
A lot of times you have to go from teams with the.
One more minute.
You have Jeff B in 6 minutes.
Not anymore. That's New Year. I should have taken off all of my.
I feel like a lot of people find both of them pretty fun, for the most part. Yeah. Some people, you can kind of find science to be boring in some ways, but I feel like a lot of times people enjoy doing experiments.
Yeah, it's a lot more interactive.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't have to meet a quota, or you don't have to have a certain freedom.
Okay, so that was a couple minutes. We thought maybe we'd go through again and just have people shout out a couple words at each site. How's that? And if you all shout out this, at the same time, that's good too. We're just trying to just spur those creative juices about why these are such natural fits. So maybe we'll start with Emeryville. Shout out your answers.
Exploration is encouraged, and physical activity could be part of it, more so than in a regular classroom.
Good. So I don't know if everyone heard that. I think the physical part is really interesting because we think of STEM in a classroom as you just sit there and look at a book, but actually scientists and engineers in real life are running around a lot, doing some physical activity as well. Okay, good. How about Alameda, County of Education?
Okay, anybody? They're both collaborative.
Good. So they're collaborative. Good. How about San Mateo? Oh, we have another one. Is Alameda have another one? It looks like.
Yeah, they're both fostering leaders.
That's a good one too. Fostering leadership. Good. What did I say? San Mateo.
It's really fun, hands-on, has manipulatives, has us move into new horizons, expand.
Good. So manipulative, hands-on, moves us into new. Sorry, the echo is so difficult. It moves us in new territory. That's really good. Good. Was Solano County?
Shout outs. I was just talking to the lovely lady here about moving forward, looking in the future, our workforce. Our workforce is highly, highly saturated with engineers, math, and this is providing our students with a foundation and an interest to pursue these fields when they're thinking about what they want to do as an adult.
That's right. So in terms of the career workforce, we need more engineers in society, and we want an after school to help our youth lead productive lives, and this is one of their ways to do it. And what's the last one? I've lost track.
Santa Clara.
Santa Clara. There's all these S's. That's confusing. Santa Clara.
They took all our good answers. But definitely, the opportunity to collaborate and share out the discovery, hands-on, getting that neurological stimulation, we felt was really important.
Good. So, see, they had something new. They added the neurological connections that you make in science and in after school. That's what we're hoping is growing your brain, right? So that both of those things have in common. So there's a lot of things that they have in common, and there's, I actually think that they're pretty big overlap, and many of the things, creative, exploring, self-directed. You have a boss in STEM too, but there's also a lot of self-direction. You've got to figure out how to solve this problem. It's a lot of times it's project-based. If you're on the working, they're giving you an app that you have to create. In after school and service learning, in a lot of the things that we do in out of school time, that's also project-based. There's a specific goal in mind. it's relevant. I mean, I think there's no other real a topic in college and higher education that's more relevant to our lives, whether it's food or security or climate change or health. I mean, that's all STEM related, or your iPhone, for goodness sake. And then lastly is what was mentioned already. I mean, I think that there's really a component in both of these elements of career development and economic justice. I mean, we're looking at a field in America where women and people of color are a tiny percentage of the STEM workforce, and yet the workforce of the future, the stable, high-paying, in-demand ones, are the ones that are STEM. And so there's this total disconnect right now about who we have to create new innovation in the country and to get good jobs and who's actually going in those fields. So again, that's what we do in after school. We believe in that. So we're really poised to bring these two fields together in a really meaningful way for our kids. So we are going to take a break, I should say, in just a few minutes. But, you know, here's just some of the terms, and I will read it for the people. Oh, we did want to check, has the PowerPoint come through yet for the people who are missing it? It's come through? Good. Does anybody still not have the PowerPoint?
Nope, everybody's got it.
Yay, see, STEM learning in action. We figured it out, yay. So in terms of the science, hey, no one was going to tell me? You're just going to let me hang here? Okay, so scientific thinking and process skills then. So again, if you think about, this is from 4-H, which as you know is in every county in America, and this is what they think scientific thinking and process skills are: observing, communicating, comparing, ordering, categorizing, relating, inferring, applying. To me, if you didn't say science on there, it says thinking skills. I mean, that's, to me, these are thinking skills, right? This is what my 3-year-old is figuring out every day. He's trying to relate every piece of candy to something he needs, right? So, you know, if you think about this as scientific thinking, but broaden it just to think about what we want to do for our youth and our programs, science is a way to help them be critical thinkers. Right? So let's not think of science in its own exclusive little bubble, but let's think about how science can help us do the things that we really believe in already in our youth development programs. So I think I've convinced you that STEM and after school are not so different. In fact, you've convinced each other, you've convinced yourself and me that there's even more overlap there than I had come up with. And every time I talk to people about it, there's more and more things that we can talk about. So again, let's get to some of the technical terms, because many of you are familiar with it. You all have read a lot of papers on it and so on. But some of these terms are, for science specifically, and these are the terms that science learning in out-of-school time folks have sort of come up with that they feel is important for our programs. So they think science learning should achieve and inspire in youth curiosity, motivation, responsibility, persistence, being capable of doing science, identifying with science or identifying as a scientist, appreciation for science, and interest in science. Now, some of these are still fuzzy, and in fact, I facilitated a program with the National Academy of Sciences. They wanted to understand if, this will scare you guys, but I'll tell you the answer was no. Well, they wanted to see if there could be some standardized metric assessments to measure science learning in out-of-school time in museums, in parks, in zoos, on NOVA channels, and so on. And the answer was no. Don't have a standardized test for science learning in out-of-school time because, one, we're looking at so many different goals. We're not saying that one 10-minute magic trick with Mobius strips should do all of these things. What we're saying is that there are some things that are going to activate different pieces of the science learning. And for a young person, they're going to need all these elements if we think that they're going to be science literate, that they care about science, or that they even want to become scientists in the future. Now, the good news is that instead of trying to learn yet a whole new set of terms, what I think is that science learning and youth development, we're just saying different things, but we really mean the same thing in our heart of hearts. So when we talk about in youth development, exploration or showing initiative,
Self-determination is a term that we use a lot. Persistence, mastery, the ability to succeed, relevance, engagement. These are terms that we use, but you know what? They can be swapped side by side. I mean, curiosity and exploration, isn't that very similar to each other? So we've created these communities that feel like we're separate. We don't feel that youth development and science learning are similar, and yet we have the same goals for young people. And Alameda County has a question, but Bruce is not here, and I am trying to figure out how to do this.
What's up?
Uh-oh. I think I just disconnected them by mistake. Oh, shoot. Alameda County. Ah! I'm so sorry. They have a question. I'm so sorry. Oh, no. I messed up. Oh, these buttons are too easy to push. I am so sorry.
They'll be able to reconnect. It'll just take a minute.
Well, they're just going to think we didn't want to answer their question. Hey, you know what? I say that science is about questioning, but I don't want any questions. So next person who has a question, we're going to disconnect you again. So I'm modeling bad behavior here. Well, while we try to reconnect them, the next sort of discussion question, and we don't need to come together necessarily for that, is really for you all to think about which youth outcomes do you feel good about for STEM after school? So in that list that we had, you know, what are the ones that you feel most passionate about, whether you personally feel passionate about, whether your program, or whether you think it's something that we can accomplish in after school? Why don't you think about this? And the goal of having you do a little bit of reflection on this individually or in pairs is the idea that let's think through some of these terms, and some of them seem overlapping, and they are, and you know, we can give you the references to actually figure out what exactly is motivation, but I deliberately didn't want to overanalyze this. What I wanted you all to do is think about these terms, think about your program, and just reflect on which are the strengths that you think you and your program and STEM can actually accomplish. So we're only going to do these for a few minutes, and we're going to actually take a break. So for 1 or 2 minutes, you reflect on your own, or you can go to the restroom and reflect. It's totally up to you. You can reflect over a cup of coffee. So we're going to take, I think, a 10-minute break, and we will reconvene. I have all these different times here.
Yeah.
So I have one clock here that says it's 10:30, one says 10:36, and one says 1:29.
I have 10:36.
10:36. So we're going to meet back here a little bit after 10:45 and reflect on this as you're taking care of your own bodily functions. So see you back here in a little bit.
What was the question?
Sorry. I will put it back. Okay, 10-minute break. Sorry about that. Oh, I should not have done. Hi, Alameda County. I think that we've got you back, and we're going to go ahead. They about, and then we're going to be back here in 10 minutes.
got
training
it. You got
coordinators.
it.
Okay.
And then we have some volunteers.
Good. Well, thank you all for heading back now. So, you know, again, that was more, I heard some great discussion here at Emeryville, and I'm sure some of you had some at the food. So I think the idea is that, you know, there's a lot of these kinds of things that we each feel either we can do better than others, or our program is set to do, or it changes from time to time because the children are different, you're at different school settings. I mean, there's so many things that change, but the idea is to at least understand that some of these youth outcomes that we're shooting for in science learning and in youth development can be reinforced with each other. So if you are thinking that your program is a youth development program, that STEM is outside of what you do, well, think about how STEM could advance your own goals. Similarly, when you're doing science, don't think of it as in its own silo. It has to be good youth development. Otherwise, why are we doing it? If it's not engaging, if it's not helping young people master things, seeing that they're successful, why would we do STEM? I mean, that seems a crazy thing to do. And yet, that's what's happening in a lot of places. So that's not what this program and What About California is all about. California is about having the two be mutually reinforcing, because what we really want are youth who are productive and healthy, and we think STEM is a way to do that. So if we agree that those are our youth goals and our outcomes, the question really is, how do we achieve them? And so I'm going to talk for another about 20 minutes or so before we end this. So it's a lot of material to cover, and in fact, I'm going to skip over some of it because some of it you already have in all the pieces of paper you're going to get and the references, and you'll get it in the PowerPoint when we send this to you right after the program today. But what we really want to do is really tie it to the learning and after school and summer principles. Now, the funny thing is, I was working with these principles and looking at STEM before Michael Funk and the California Department of Education started using these principles as quality for after-school programs. So I'm a big fan of this before I knew that it was going to be useful. And the reason is because it's 5 things. I can pretty much remember 4 of the 5 at any time, even at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's better than 8. It's better than 11. It's better than a lot of other ones. But I just think it's so simple, and it makes sense. And I don't have to memorize all these things about what makes a high-quality program if I can just test myself. Is this activity promote learning that is active? Is it collaborative? Is it meaningful to the young people? Does it help them get better at something? Does it help them expand their horizon? Help them think about something they haven't thought about before? And if I can figure out those things, I can pretty much decide whether a program is good or not. Of course, the implementation is going to matter. Of course, there's some things that are going to be continuous improvement and so on. But if this is the fundamental, I don't have to memorize a whole bunch of different things. I can go to the heart of something and decide whether this is helping young people in their daily lives. And so to me, this is what the learning principles do. Now, the funny thing is, if you look at some of the things that happen in the classroom, this is the National Science Teachers Association. This is what they tell parents you should look for high-quality STEM in your kids' schools. But if you take out science and you cross out science and you reread everything here, this is what you would look for anything in the classroom, not just science. So think about it. Instructors use hands-on, minds-on, using materials to experience active learning. So that's active learning. That's the learning in after-school principle. Students are encouraged to ask questions and practice skills, life skills. That's a good thing, right? Students learn how to find out and make up their own minds by experimenting, investigating how the world works rather than just memorizing facts. This is really true for science. It's funny because this one actually doesn't say science in it, but this is the problem with a lot of science that's not effective. And then students' learning experiences should be activity-centered, use a mix of activities, large group presentations, working groups, individual activities. Again, this is the idea of, it should serve the young people and have a diversity of ways to approach it. So if you look at this list, it is like the learning and after-school principles. It is active, it's collaborative, it's meaningful, relevant, all those things. And this is true not just for, if you take out STEM, but it's not in the classroom either. So if you look at all of these things, it's not limited to science, and it's not limited to the classroom. You know, it's actually learning, right? This is what we do. And this is the interesting thing about what's going to happen this year with the next generation science standards. As you may have heard, the new standard draft came out for people to comment on just a couple days ago. And the idea is they want people to look at what we think the nation's young people should be learning in science. And it's not going to be like, how many miles away is the moon? It'll be like, you know, how do you know how far away is the moon? How do you think about these? How do you use tools? How do you do science? How do you think about science? It's about learning habits and process more than it is about factoids that you can check up on the web. So the idea is that what's happening in after school, what's happened in after school in the last 10 years is actually infiltrating what's happening in the classroom. If you think about the classroom now, instead of sitting at a seat learning from a textbook because you have to take an exam, what we're now trying to do in America is change the culture of what we think is important about science learning. And it will be collaborative and team approach and hands-on and about asking questions, not about answering factoids. So here's this convergence, and what I'd like to do is try to take the best practices of after school and try to bring them into the classroom. So this is our way of doing this. So again, learning and after school principles, again, you need to do that from now on for the California Department of Education. But to me, it's not additional work when you think about science. It should be the same set of questions, but applied to science learning. So really quickly then, if we think about classroom, we think about after school, another place where they do science education is in the museum. And so this is from the Exploratorium, which is the tinkering studio. And they've been doing this project called MAPPed, which is Museums After School, Principles, Data, and Design. And what they've done is put together some principles that they think how you should design a museum program. And if you look at some of these things, I'm sorry that the print is so small, but again, you're going to get all this stuff. If you look at some of the things that they've written down, they tie really well to the learning and after school principles. So in terms of activity design, they've said that activities should be built on visitors' prior interests and knowledge. And to me, that means, you know, learning has to be meaningful. It has to relate to something that the visitors or after-school youth should have. Material should be evocative, invite inquiry. It should be about asking questions. It should be about multiple pathways. And activities should encourage learners to complexify their thinking over time. To me, that's sort of expanding your horizons or mastery or something, but it sounds really cool. Exemplify their thinking over time, complexify their thinking over time. This idea that they're going to learn deeper and more and extend what you've given them. Another one, environmental design. What's the design of the space? This is, again, in a museum, but it's so relevant to us in after school as well. So they should have supporting individual initiative and autonomy, but it should also provide adjacencies, so there's cross-pollination of ideas, and there should be talk and collaboration. And lastly, in a museum, what are we teaching, quote unquote, teaching, facilitating, that's what they call it in a museum. And the facilitation should be welcoming and tended to spark interest. It should strengthen understanding by helping learners clarify their intentions through reflective conversation. All of which is to say, the things that we talked about before the break, that it's collaborative, it's team building. So many of the things that we're doing in all these different spaces are converging based on the evidence and based on what youth really need and deserve. So the kinds of things that we're doing now in after school have been proven in other places. They've been proven in after school, and we don't want to throw away what we know in order to do STEM. Right? We want to do it in a way that we think is effective. So one of the things that we'll send out to is 4-H also has this experiential learning checkoff list. And I won't go through all the text now, but we'll send it to you. This might be a way to sort of think through those things that we talked about at the beginning that made your Mobius strip a better activity. It's collaborative. Does it ask questions? Is it hands-on? All those kinds of things. So we'll send this out to you with the PowerPoint, and maybe this will be something that you can modify or you can use in the future. So lastly then, we're going to do this for about 5 minutes, and then we're going to end. And that is, how do you identify a high-quality program? and what do you look for in a high quality activity? And what I mean is, how do you make judgments not in STEM? So whether you're looking at a nutrition program, a fitness program, a conflict resolution program, a reading literacy program, language arts, English learner program, how do you identify a high quality program? You know, what are the questions you ask yourself before signing a partner or buying a curriculum? And we'll do this for 2 minutes, actually, just writing down your thoughts and sharing with a partner. We won't share back as a group. But let me reinforce the idea that you have the skills needed to judge STEM. So just a couple minutes, either you or a partner, just talking about how do you look for a high quality program or an activity.
We went on time.
We're unmuted.
Okay, good. So again, I think that many of you already know how to do a lot of it, and so part of it is looking at STEM. So in this last section, then just the next few minutes, I'll go over a few of the tools that are sort of STEM specific, things that might be a little bit different from other things that you might use. And I have a lot more in the PowerPoint, but we're not going to go through all of them, and I didn't mean to. Anyway, the idea is that you would have it in the PowerPoint and you could look at it when you wanted to. So this is one of the resources that I like, which is the Coalition for Building After-School Systems, which is CBAS. And they have a Frontiers in Urban Science Exploration Resource Guide. And it's based on the work that they did in New York City with the After School Corporation, TASC. And again, we'll send you the whole link. But this is one of the ways that they suggest, based on their best practices, of how you might look at quality. So under integrating high quality curriculum, they say that high quality curriculum meets the following criterion. It's designed for after school. And that's one of the things I think after school people often do, especially with STEM. Like, they wouldn't do it for anything else, but for STEM, they think it's perfectly fine to take something that's used in the classroom and use it as is. Now, maybe it's true, but maybe there's going to need to be modifications based on time, expectations. I mean, kids don't want to do something that they did in school and after school necessarily. So that's not a good way to automatically take what's in the classroom. Again, you wouldn't do it for anything else, but you do it for STEM. That's kind of dissing STEM, right? So you want to have something that's designed for after school or has been modified for after school and tested. You want to look for something that's inquiry-based, and boy, the four-letter word, fun, P-H-U-N, right? It needs to be fun. That is something that you don't see in a lot of places about how to select criterion. So that's why I like this resource guide. Thirdly, it says it should involve familiar materials to make the case that science is part of our everyday lives. One, if you're buying exotic things, one, it's too expensive, but two, how does that show kids that this is something they could do? If it's only done with expensive, high-tech equipment that they're only supposed to touch with their little tiny pinky and they're not supposed to break, is that really something that you're trying to inspire them with? Promoting equity among boys and girls, students of varying abilities and across ethnicities. Again, this is something that, when I hear about education reform, and they're all talking about differentiated learning and about how every kid learns differently, and it's like, wow, we pretty much knew that in after school a long time ago. And so this is something, again, that we can apply our best practices to. Evidence-based, there are a lot of studies out there already for after school programs. Activities, pick one that has an evaluation. You can figure out whether those worked for their kids, and maybe it'll work for your kids. Don't just go on their catchy website or slogan. There's a lot of studies already out there. And lastly, affordable. Affordable does matter, because affordable means that you can sustain that use in your classroom. The other thing that I think is very STEM specific is this idea about co-inquiry. There was a study by NASA a few years ago that said that perhaps the after-school field where your instructors, where your youth workers are scared of science, maybe that's a better way to teach kids who are scared of science. If you have somebody who has a PhD in science come in, that may not help your kids necessarily feel they can do it. They might be inspiring as a role model and expand their horizon, but it may not be the most accessible next step for them. But maybe having someone who comes in and says, I didn't really like science, and I don't know what's going to happen when we mix up these two things. Let's do it together. That embodies what science is about. It's about what we don't know. And if we always have someone at the front of the room telling them, like I did, this is a special Mobius strip because look at the mathematical formula, you dummy. That's not the best way to get that across. So this idea that, I actually forget sometimes what happens if I cut along the edge, right? Or if I twist it how many times, I don't remember how many loops I get. That might be a good thing, because then it means that, the adult and the youth are learning together, and that's much more realistic about what science is about. So that, I think, the co-inquiry and taking advantage of the fact that you have people in your staff who don't like science or who are intimidated by science, if they can go there and be enthusiastic and say, I don't know, let's figure it out together. I'm not embarrassed to say that I don't know, I'm going to look up the answer for you, let's look it up together. That is the real process and thinking skills and habits of mind that we're hoping to promote. So your staff can promote that and model that. Lastly, encouraging collaborative learning, and that's something what we've already talked about many times. So I'm going to go ahead and skip to the sort of the last formal thing, and that is something that many of you will either be trained on or will hear about, and that is from Harvard, the dimensions of success. We call it the DOS tool, DOS. And what this is it's a philosophy, it's a system, it's an evaluation rubric, assessment rubric that thinks about what helps science and after school succeed with youth. And what they've done is they've put together these 4 dimensions of success and the pieces within each of those dimensions. Now, one of the great things about it is that some of this is just obvious for people who know good youth development and after school. So the last column on the right, which says youth development in STEM, relationships, relevance, youth voice, boy, Many of you know Youth Voice. You promote it, you embrace it. You already know how to do that. So it doesn't matter that it's STEM or not STEM, you have the basics. What's different about this is it does put some specific STEM in there about STEM, content learning, inquiry, engagement with STEM. So there are some pieces in here that are a little bit different for science, but in the end, it's still something that you pretty much know. So let's go to the STEM knowledge and practices. So some of these things that they feel helps a STEM activity be successful is that, is STEM content presented accurately? Well, one of the things that I've heard people say is that that's really intimidating to see as the first thing on this chart. And what I would say is that if you're promoting questions, then the questions are always accurate because the questions are real questions. So if you think about STEM content, not as factoids, but if you think of STEM content as the ability to ask questions, the ability to convince your partner that you're right, if those are STEM content, skills, process, practice, then you don't worry so much about is it presented accurately. Because presented accurately is how do you ask a question? And how can you be wrong about how to ask a question, right? So don't let that intimidate you. It's not STEM facts, it's STEM content. Then the next one is on the bottom of that is do the students' comments, questions, and performance during activities reflect accurate uptake of STEM content? Again, don't think of it as a passive, you're giving them facts that they have to swallow with a spoonful of sugar. What you're doing is you're really trying to get them to accurately think about, how do you gather evidence, how do you convince others, how do you ask questions, those kinds of things. So don't let that column intimidate you at all when you get there. Then the next one is inquiry. Are students participating in the practices of scientists, mathematicians, engineers, etc.? Are they figuring out which button is going to disconnect Alameda County of Education? Are they figuring out if you cut this or tape this Mobius strip in a certain way, you're going to get handcuffs, which is what we got over here. That's the practice of scientists and mathematicians and engineers. It's revising, reflecting, talking to each other, arguing about it, and trying to get money for it. That's what the practice of science is all about, right? Are students observing, collecting data, building explanations? Are they revising their hypotheses? Are they admitting that they're wrong? Are they finding out the right answer from their partner? That's the kind of thing that we're asking for here. And then the reflection is, do students have the opportunities to reflect and engage in meaning making about the activities and related content? So that's one of the reasons that my magic trick was horrible, because it didn't allow any of you or me to stop for a moment and think about, why is it strange that when I cut a loop, it ends up being one long loop? I mean, that's bizarre. That's almost like a magic trick. But why does that work? I don't have to know the answer. I cannot figure out that mathematical formula. But I can say, you know what, that does not meet my expectations. That did not meet my hypothesis. And why is that? How would I investigate that further? So that's what that means about engaging in meaning making and thinking about what you've done and not just thinking it's one cool thing and we're moving on to the next thing. That might get people interested in science short term, but that's not going to get them to engage or want to become scientists in the future. So then to just wrap up then is to think about what you will all be receiving is the STEM program planning tool that's coming from the central office of all these innovation centers. And in here you'll see some specific items and ways to describe quality. And again, when you look at the terminology here, which I'm not going to show you now, but will be in your PowerPoint, what you want to do is reflect on how that reflects your own goals, your own passions, your own youth, and what your mission in life is, not only for your program, but for you. How do you look at what quality STEM is defined? How do you make it personal for you? How do you make it that you care about it enough to share it with your young people? That is the way to make this sustained. I've heard so many people tell me that STEM is just the bandwagon now. Just because Obama is exploding things at the science fair at the White House, it's only a fad. And here in after school, kids vote with their feet And there's going to be a next bandwagon. We've done nutrition. We've done gang prevention. We've done Just Say No. We've done obesity prevention. This is just the latest. And what I'm trying to convince people is that this is not a fad, because this is about growing up young people. This is about helping them think and survive and being productive. This is about helping solve the problems in their community and in the world around us. It can't be a fad, because if it's a fad, then we're facing the same hunger and disease and climate change that we have in the last 50 years. This can't be a fad. The only way to do this sustainably is to have you believe it from your heart. For you to believe that this is in the best interest of your young people, that your staff are going to enjoy doing this, and that there's questions out there to tackle. So just to end then is to just think about, how well did your activity compare? In the 10 minutes that you all created a Mobius activity, you were able to do the things that all these people from Harvard and all these NSTA and 4-H and all these rubrics that you're going to see in the PowerPoint, all these language that you hear about, all these definitions, all these lists, all these checklists, all these assessment tools. You were able in 10 minutes with a pair of scissors, some tape, and a strip of paper to make something that you all thought would be engaging. It asks questions. It's about teamwork. You were able to do that. So don't let any of these rubrics turn you off and dissuade you from what you know is best for young people. Take that, translate it, use the quality tools, because they are based in research. They're based in people's experience. They're based on thousands and thousands of young people filling out surveys and being tested and being observed. That's how we got these tools. But the tools don't exist in a vacuum. They only exist when you use them and you use them well. So just to kind of end, we talked about this as sort of a magic trick at the beginning. And the reality is that there's a lot of math involved. There's a good way and a bad way to do it. But if you all can take all this information, not just in this webinar, but in the future webinars, in all these handouts you have, in the amount of information, the websites, the activities, there's so much information you have. But if you can distill it through your own personal lens and the lens of your young people, it's going to look like a magic trick. Because at the end of the day, when the kids have fun and they ask you so many questions that you couldn't answer, it's going to look easy. It's going to feel easy. Because it's going to be based on what you know best and what you know you can do. It's going to look like a magic trick to everyone else. You're going to make it easy on everybody. They're going to see that STEM is not very hard. But it's all the hard work, all the research, all these tools that you have at hand that you can use that's going to make this work. So with that, I'm going to end, and we'll send you the links, and I wish you luck on this path. And remember, scientists come up with mistakes, and they have trial and error, and I just connected Alameda County of Education, but it can be fixed, and that's what trial and error and learning and discovery and self-empowerment are all about. So thank you all very much for the work you do.
Thank you, Carol. We can give Carol the silence. Applause if you're all muted out there. Thanks a lot, Carol. So I want to talk about a few next steps, and then I'm going to turn it over to your local hosts out there to conclude the workshop with you. So the first thing is when we turn it over to your local hosts, they have a bunch of questions to help facilitate a discussion. You've heard a lot today, and hopefully through some conversation you can start to think about some next steps for you personally and for your organization. Next thing I wanted to share is you should look for an email from me. I'm going to use the Eventbrite system that you use to register to send you an email. And in that email will be links to Carol's PowerPoint and some of the other documents that she referenced. Some of you out there didn't register yourselves through Eventbrite, but somebody registered you, so you're going to have to rely on them to forward the email to you, because those are the only email addresses that I have at hand. So make sure to bug them. If somebody else registered you for the workshop, make sure to bug them for it. Next thing is you should look for invitations to future workshops. As soon as we can confirm those dates, which hopefully will be in the next week, we will start sending out invitations to future workshops. We'll be using a similar format, although we may have to switch locations depending on availability and some other factors. And then finally, if you know somebody else out there who works in this field who might benefit from participating in this workshop, the workshop is being recorded, and we will be archiving that and posting it somewhere easily accessible on the web, probably Vimeo or YouTube. So you'll receive a link from me, and you'll be able to share that video so other folks can watch Carol's presentation and the rest of the workshop. So with that, if there are no burning questions that anybody has, I'll say farewell for today, and you can all shut off your video link and convene in your local groups.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
I guess they can see us.